My only payment for fixing that craft wasn't money. It was truth. And the truth that thing showed me about Jesus wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Forget religion. Forget the flannel board stories from Sunday school. This wasn't doctrine. This was connection. A missing piece that makes your entire existence click into place. But I need to warn you before we go any further. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. It will light up blind spots you didn't even know were there. And it will cast shadows on everything you thought was safe. If you're ready to confront what you've been told is absolute, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happened to Eli Turner on that ranch in West Texas was not the conclusion of a mystery. It was the ignition of a revelation that has been frozen in time for 2,000 years. I fixed an alien craft, and what that being showed me about Jesus will rewrite everything you think you know. Not religion, not belief, alignment, something hidden, something that, once understood, makes your entire life finally make sense. You've been warned. Now let me tell you how it all began. Morning arrives without color. Dawn drags itself across Nolan County like it has somewhere better to be. The sun doesn't rise, it leaks, weak and exhausted. The house sits quiet against the flat horizon. A single-story ranch home swallowed by land that no longer remembers laughter. Paint peels from the porch rail. A rust-stained coffee mug waits beside the sink like a tired ritual. Inside lives a man no one checks on. Eli Turner, 62 years old, wakes before the alarm. Habit, not purpose. The knees ache first, then the chest, the steady reminder of a heart surgery payment plan he will not live long enough to finish. The VA helps with part of it. The rest belongs to the bank, hungry as drought. Coffee brews not because he wants it, but because it's the only thing left that still answers him back. Folgers, strong, bitter, cheap. He drinks it standing. On the kitchen table, a stack of envelopes leans like a crooked tombstone. Every one of them stamped with windows. Every window showing a line in bold. Amount due. There is a rhythm to the dread. Medical, mortgage, utility. Repeat. Behind on payments, behind in life. The mailbox sits a quarter-mile down the gravel driveway. He checks it twice a day, though nothing ever comes. Hope, it turns out, is just another unpaid bill. The house remains silent. No children's photos, no framed family tree, just the steady hum of an outdated refrigerator and a dusty American flag folded in a shadowed corner, the kind people keep when they have no one left to give it to. A truck sits in the driveway, a '99 Ford F-150. Primer gray. Front bumper held with wire. The driver's seat cushion collapsed from years of getting in and getting out and never getting anywhere. Yet he keeps the oil changed. He keeps the tank a quarter full. He cannot explain why. Habit is a kind of faith. Eli used to fix things, real things. Army motor pool, then electrician. Machines made sense. Wires obeyed rules. Electricity didn't lie. In a world of broken promises and vanishing people, a DeWalt drill and a Craftsman wrench were evidence that some things stayed true. Now the pole barn is his church. Metal shelves, sag under parts, starter coils, stripped copper, PVC pipe, tools cleaned and arranged by function like a mechanic's liturgy. The radio murmurs AM talk as background, not for company, just to prove sound still exists. But the house? Hollow. Dinner is eaten in silence. Microwave meals. One plate, one fork. One chair pulled away from the table because setting two feels delusional. He fills his day with motion, checking fences, clearing tumbleweed from the gate, sorting scrap for the recycling yard. Busy is cheaper than lonely. Busy doesn't ask questions he can't answer. At night, he watches the Weather Channel not because he's afraid of storms, but because storms make noise. Storms fill the void. Stillness is the real threat. On this morning, beneath fluorescent kitchen light, one envelope sits separate from the rest. Brown. Thick. Government paper. No point pretending it's anything else. Final notice foreclosure proceeding. 9 days. The coffee tastes like metal. His thumb hesitates over the envelope, not out of fear of losing the land, but fear of what losing the land will prove. That he was never chosen for anything. The body can get used to struggle. The soul can't. Money first, the wound everyone can see. 3 months behind. No overtime to save him. No second income to soften the blow. Just a man and a mortgage and a shrinking calendar. The medical bills hit after the bypass, each stamped with urgency, each one claiming a pound of him. Insurance was a luxury. The VA covered the part they could. The rest was left like a punishment. People say poverty humbles you. They don't say it isolates you. Then came the second wound, the one that still bleeds invisibly. Love that walked away. The memory remains sharp. Porch boards under bare feet. Her suitcase in the doorway. Her voice steady. She wasn't angry anymore. And that was worse. Anger means someone still cares. Indifference means they're already gone. When she left, the house lost its center. When his son followed her into silence, the man lost his reason. Love did not break him. What broke him was being forgettable. A third wound formed beneath the others, the deepest, because no one could see it. Faith. For a decade, Eli prayed the same prayer, in the same chair, with the same Bible open to the same pages. He asked for restoration, for forgiveness, for a sign that God saw him. He tithed when he couldn't afford groceries. He volunteered at the men's breakfast, even when he stopped being invited to the table. He prayed while signing medical papers. He prayed while cutting wood in winter. He prayed while staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. Begging for something, anything to change, and nothing did. Faith without response becomes torture. A Bible sits inside his nightstand drawer. The leather is cracked, the pages highlighted and wrinkled from years of being read with tears. Dust clings to its surface now, the kind that only gathers when something has been untouched for months. Eventually, prayer stopped feeling like hope. It started to feel like humiliation. He stopped praying quietly, the way men surrender when no one is watching. Not with anger, not with ceremony. Just absence. Absence can be louder than rage. The final collapse came 6 months ago. A Sunday morning. Rain tapping the roof. Church clothes laid on the bed. He sat in the truck with the engine running, hands gripping the wheel. After 20 minutes, he turned off the engine, walked back inside, and placed the Bible face down in the drawer. He told no one. He didn't need to. The silence spoke loud enough. Tonight, that drawer is still closed, the Bible still inside, and Eli moves around it the way someone moves around the grave of someone they once loved but no longer visit. He learned to live with hunger. He learned to live with loneliness. But learning to live without God, that was the wound that never should have been survivable. Yet here he is, still breathing, still waiting for something he no longer believes exists. In the stillness of that drawer, in the dust on its leather, the vow slips out of him, not loud, not proud, just final. He is done praying. Weather has rules. Wind arrives before rain. Thunder warns before lightning. Nature gives you patterns enough time to prepare. But not tonight. A panhandle squall line gathers its strength over miles of dying fields. Radar paints it angry red. Storm chasers on FM radio call it a wall cloud. Tornado weather. The kind that makes your skin prickle. Eli steps onto the porch, expecting chaos. Instead, chaos backs away. The wind folds in on itself as though commanded to kneel. Coyotes stop mid-yelp, as if a hand pressed mute. Even insects vanish from the soundscape. The storm hovers over the land like a predator, choosing its angle. And then a vibration. The ground hums. Not shaking, not quaking, vibrating. Like a hidden generator buried beneath the prairie has been switched on. The vibration travels through gravel into bone. It passes through ribs not as sound but as memory. As if the body recognizes something ancient. The clouds tighten into unnatural geometry, sharp edges, unnatural curves like something inside the storm is shaping the sky from within. Then comes the pressure. The air thickens. The atmosphere compresses against skin and chest and skull, like trying to breathe underwater. A strange metallic taste forms on the tongue, hot copper mixed with rain. Fences begin to tremble. Loose nails quiver. The screen door shivers against its hinges. Eli's hand grips the deadbolt, not to keep something out, but because it is the only solid thing left. The storm should roar. Instead, it listens. Lightning flashes not downward but horizontally across the underbelly of the clouds, tracing a perfect line miles wide, as though someone is cutting open the night. The floodlight on the barn bursts into a sterile white that swallows color. No shadows, no gradients, just exposure. Reality goes flat. The hum deepens too low, too heavy, too deliberate to belong to weather. It shifts direction, not across the sky, but through it. Moving, not like wind, but like a decision. Eli tries to swallow, but his throat refuses. Some storms break trees. Some storms break silence. This one breaks the rules. The hum moves again. This time, it curves arc-like over the barn, as if tracking. The air feels watched, observed, measured. A slow awareness dawns. The storm is not malfunctioning. The storm is being overridden. Then, without warning, the porch light dies. Darkness swallows him whole. The hum shifts position, not across the sky but directly above him. Morning exposes what the night tried to hide. The storm has moved on, leaving the world washed and strangely newborn. Dew clings to mesquite thorns. The air carries that rare silence that follows trouble. But in the lower pasture, the land itself seems scorched into perfection. A circle 20 feet across lies carved into the field, not burned, not crushed. The grass has fused into glass, each blade melted and hardened without fire. It gleams under the rising sun like a frozen lake, smooth and intentional. Ranch land doesn't make shapes like this. Nature is messy. Nature is chaos. But this ring is geometry cold, exact, impossible. Touching it feels like trespassing. Heat radiates upward, soft, steady. Yet frost clings to the fence post beside it, coating splinters of wood in delicate crystals. Warmth and winter, inches apart. No wild brush fire does that. No lightning in the world chooses only a perfect circle. The fence line offers the next violation of logic. Old nails, rusted, bent, inconsistent, now point in a uniform direction. Not randomly, not vaguely. Every one of them angled like compass needles pulled toward a silent north. Something magnetized the metal, not for an instant, but permanently. Even the wire staples inside the wood have rotated, buried in grain, obedient to whatever field passed through the night. Something manipulated matter, something rearranged physics. In the dust beyond the fence, movement left evidence, but the evidence refuses to make sense. Tracks scatter in a curving pattern, each imprint deep and even. 5 long impressions extend like delicate fingers. No hooves, no paws. Nothing drags. Each step sinks the same depth, as if weight distributes perfectly like something designed, not born. The trail cuts through a patch of cholla cactus. Cholla doesn't forgive contact. Its spines punish anything that comes near, even denim and leather. But here, the cactus stands unbroken, every thorn intact. The prints go in. The prints come out. The cactus remains untouched. Whatever crossed here didn't avoid the cactus. It ignored it. The footprints lead toward the creek bed dry, sun-bleached, lined with limestone slabs that erode into ragged teeth. The air grows cooler as the land dips. A cottonwood rises at the bend, its bark scarred by storms. Decades of wind carving cracks deep into its trunk. At eye level, something interrupts the rough grain. A smooth fragment, metallic, seamless, rests, embedded beneath the bark. Not tacked on. Not hammered in. Grown into the tree. The surface reflects nothing. It swallows light, cold to the touch but humming faintly beneath the fingers. The vibration bypasses skin. It goes straight into bone. Metal shouldn't hum like memory. The mind reaches for explanations, wind damage, prank, scrap metal lodged years ago. But the edges are too precise, too intentional. And when a fingertip grazes it again, the vibration deepens. The inner ear registers it like distant thunder, but the earth remains still. The body reacts before thought does. A spike of adrenaline, a chill up the spine, a realization. This isn't a leftover of the storm. This is a leftover of something that used the storm. And the footprints, still fresh, continue past the tree, moving toward a ridge where the creek narrows. The grass there is pressed, parted in a way that suggests not panic, but exhaustion. Like something climbed out and then staggered. The sun rises higher. The air shifts. Something is waiting around the bend. The cottonwood hums again, deeper this time, like it recognizes the touch, and the metal buried inside it sings through bone. The creek bends sharply, revealing a sheltered hollow carved by decades of flash floods. The soil is soft, the limestone smoothed by water that no longer visits, and nestled there, half-buried, rests a shape that defies the vocabulary of ranch life. It doesn't crash into the earth, it rests in it, a hull, matte, seamless, neither metal nor stone. Color, impossible to name. Not black, not gray. It behaves like a shadow wearing the suggestion of form. Every angle absorbs sunlight, refusing to shine. Light dies on contact, as though the craft is made from the idea of emptiness. One side of it has split open, not shattered, not torn, opened, like a seed pod releasing something fully grown. Along the cracked seam, a thin vapor rises, curling into the air the way warmth escapes a bakery oven at dawn. But the vapor isn't steam. It glows faintly, not bright, just enough to betray purpose. Eli's training mechanic first, electrician second, recognizes patterns no one should see here. Structural paneling with no visual fasteners. Curvature too mathematically perfect for manufacturing. Material that refuses to echo when tapped. The surface gives slightly under pressure. Not soft. Not rigid. Organic engineering. Technology that imitates life. Beneath the hull, dried mud shows the first clear evidence. A smear of weight. An indentation too light for machinery, too heavy for an animal. Something climbed out. Something carried itself up the bank with long, dragging steps. Heat radiates from the craft, not burning heat, but the kind felt standing near a running generator. A low, steady warmth that suggests internal systems not yet dormant. Combined with the perfect geometry in the field, it paints a conclusion that science fiction tries to explain and religion tries to avoid. Whatever arrived last night didn't fall. It decided. The prints continue up the ridge. Long strides. Even spacing. No staggering. The trail curves toward open pasture first, then abruptly veers north, avoiding the open like a hunted thing. Scuff marks appear next. Not scratches. Not claw marks. The kind left by something bracing itself against the land with limbs that never evolved for dirt or gravity. They arc in a half circle, leading toward the Turner pole barn. The pattern is deliberate, like someone choosing shelter, not panic. Something intelligent walked away from the hull. Something wounded. Close to the barn, the dust shows its last tracks. Each step grows lighter, not weaker, more careful. A creature conserving what strength remains. A consciousness preserving its final energy for one decisive destination. The pasture gate leans open. A hinge that never creaks now hangs silent. Inside the barn, shadows gather around tools and scrap in unnatural stillness. But the prints stop right at the door, sharp, defined, and then disappear completely. Not faded. Gone. Like whatever entered the barn stopped needing weight. The craft remains in the creek bed, quiet and patient. It doesn't need escape. It doesn't need concealment. Whatever it carried has moved on. Night brought something to this ranch. Morning reveals something left the craft and chose where to go next. The scuff marks align perfectly toward the barn, evidence that whatever emerged from that hull didn't run. It walked. The barn swallows sound the way a deep cave swallows light. Dust floats in still air, suspended like memory. The smell of oil, old rope, and weathered timber forms a heavy mix. Morning sun filters through cracks, slicing the space into bars of gold. Something is inside. At first, there is no shape, only a distortion, a warping of space where the eye expects emptiness. The silhouette forms slowly, assembling from shadows the way frost forms on glass. Not human, not animal. A presence. Tall, jointed wrongly, limbs proportioned for a world with lighter gravity, motion too fluid for bone, too precise for instinct. And then the tremor begins small at first, then deeper. Not aggression, not dominance, weakness, a kind of shaking that comes when the body has begun surrendering to failure. It leans forward, bracing against the wall, not from fear, but from injury. Its surface catches the dim light and rejects definition. Smooth, but not skin. Solid, but not metal. Every breath or whatever simulates breath comes with a slight ripple across its surface. The air around it feels wrong, not cold, emptied, like the barn is holding its breath. Eli's pulse spikes, body locking into the familiar stance of instinctual fear. But beneath the terror, other circuits fire to life. Training, assessment, calculation. Years of troubleshooting machinery translate automatically into reading this broken thing. This wounded presence. Where is the damage? What system is failing? How much time does it have? The eyes, if they are eyes, lift. No malice, only exhaustion. A sense that the last of its strength brought it here on purpose. Tools glint on the bench wrenches, coils of wire, copper scrap. Everything a mechanic clings to as proof that problems can be solved. The sight of them triggers a response he can't control. His brain catalogs supplies, measures possibilities, the same way he did in the motor pool during the Army years, repairing battered engines in heat that could break a man. Terror fights purpose, but purpose is winning. The being sways, and for a moment, its form loses cohesion, edges blurring like heat haze. The tremor deepens. Something inside it is failing, and gravity is becoming the enemy. Stillness grips the barn, the kind that compresses time, the kind that forces a choice. Some fears paralyze. Some fears assign responsibility. Instinct surges, carving language out of shock. His mind forms a name not out of faith, but reflex, and the creature reacts as if the word itself is a command. The moment the word forms unspoken, yet thunderous, something shifts. Not in the air, in reality. The being does not recoil in terror. It bows internally. The barn fills not with sound, but with recognition. A connection, ancient and immediate, passes through the space the way a tuning fork sings when the right note meets it. Eli feels it in the chest, not the ears. His mind becomes a theater screen, and images begin to unfurl across it. Not memories, witnessing. Dust rises beneath sandals in a sun-soaked place where the air smells of salt and heat. Crowds move like tides around a single figure whose presence bends attention without effort. The scene doesn't speak in language. It speaks in awe. Then the vision shifts. A riverbank in the American South. Hymns float across warm water. Lanterns tremble in summer wind. People fall to their knees. Faces lit with the same astonishment as those ancient crowds. The being connects them as equal moments, as if time isn't linear, but layered. One more layer unfolds. A stadium revival. Spotlights cutting the darkness. A preacher's voice riding through amplifiers. Thousands of people. Hands lifted toward a presence they cannot see but swear they can feel. The being absorbs the memory, not judging, not explaining, only linking. Across centuries, across continents, across denominations, humans reach for the same light, and the being has watched every attempt. The images collapse into a single truth. This presence didn't come to explain a religion. It came to confirm a reality. Light pulses beneath the creature's rib-like structure, soft at first, then brighter. A panel near its side reveals a fracture, a jagged opening where energy leaks in slow ribbons. Each pulse weakens the form. Whatever sustains it is draining. The barn remains quiet. The air remains reverent. For the first time, the moment becomes undeniable. This being knows the name not as an exclamation, but as a coordinate. The light beneath its ribs pulses again brighter, synchronizing to something unseen. Not pain, not warning. Recognition. Eli stands in the presence of something wounded, something ancient, something that has carried knowledge across galaxies not to dominate, not to conquer, but to return a message once given to the world. The name that left his lips in reflex is the destination this being has spent a lifetime following. The cracked panel flares with the same impossible color that flooded the barn the night the sky stopped breathing. Proof that something sacred and scientific is converging. Some decisions don't happen in the mind, they happen in the ribs. The barn is still trembling with the last echo of impossible light when the realization lands with weight. Whatever stands before him is dying, and whatever he has left in life that still resembles purpose is now standing on the other side of that trembling form. Years of silence from heaven, years of unanswered prayers, now hinge on the one thing he has always understood: fix what's broken. Not spiritually, Mechanically, the being needs power, alignment, stabilization. Machines speak a universal language, even when they weren't built here. Copper coils, current flow, field resonance. Words Eli hasn't used in a long time rise up like muscle memory. His hands already know where to reach. The barn is full of parts. The junk pile is full of possibilities. For the first time in a decade, his skill isn't a burden. It's the key. But this isn't a repair job. It's a trade. 3 days. 2 batteries. 1 question. Not a question about aliens. Not about the craft. Not about the universe. Just one. Why was heaven silent when he begged for an answer? Coils of wire stack on the workbench. Each loop a symbol of something he lost hope. Time, faith, and something he might regain. His hands don't shake. His heart does. The creature's fading light flickers like a candle caught in wind. And Eli senses the truth. If he walks away, the light dies. If he helps, everything he believes might collapse. Knowledge has consequences. Revelation demands rearrangement. The being offers nothing verbal, only presence. Yet Eli understands. Once this truth enters him, it will rearrange the architecture of his life. Like a nail pulled from the fence line, everything will point somewhere new. He gathers supplies, copper wire from an old breaker panel, PVC from a forgotten irrigation system, 2 deep cycle batteries from under a tarp, each item a piece of his old life, repurposed into something unfamiliar. Sweat beads along his temple. Dust coats his shirt. He hasn't moved with this much urgency since the army motor pool. Something subtle shifts. The barn clock blinks. 7:7. A moment later, as he pulls a scrap receipt from his pocket. Whataburger? Coffee and fries, the timestamp reads the same. 7:7 p.m. A pattern too precise to ignore. Numbers are not miracles, but they can be direction. The number follows him in mile markers, in the change he didn't mean to count, in the placement of tools that fit together too neatly to be random. At first, he thinks coincidence. Then it becomes choreography. Something is answering. Something is acknowledging the question. 3 days. 2 batteries. 1 truth that will cost him the version of himself that survived the silence. He begins to wind the first coil. The barn clock flickers again, 7:7, holding steady, as if time itself is waiting for his next move. Time becomes a predator. The moment the bargain forms, everything around Eli tightens like the world was waiting for him to commit before it began closing doors. The first pressure comes from the bank. 9 days until foreclosure. 9 days until the land his father cleared by hand becomes someone else's investment property. Letters pile on the kitchen table like accusations. They don't threaten. They assume. They already speak as though he is lost. The second pressure lives in the sky. Storm cells rebuild on the horizon, those same unnatural greens and violets beginning to smudge the edge of the world. Weather shouldn't return this fast. Systems need time to reorganize. Yet clouds gather like a memory trying to finish what it started. The third pressure arrives each Thursday at precisely noon. Sheriff's cruiser, white, dust trail. A glance toward the barn every time it passes. In small towns, the sheriff doesn't need probable cause. Curiosity is enough, especially when a man has slipped out of the community and into the quiet. People become suspicious when a man stops showing up at church. The fourth pressure is invisible but lethal. Gossip. Small towns have their own surveillance system. Prayer chains disguised as information hubs. Neighbors pretending to care about checking in when what they want is something to talk about at the diner. Out here, privacy ends at the property line. A man who keeps to himself becomes a story waiting for a narrator. Eli begins to move with caution. Barn lights stay off at night. Tools are wrapped in towels to muffle sound. While harvesting copper wire from the breaker panel, he keeps one ear trained toward the county road. While walking to the mailbox, he studies the horizon more than the mail. Something inside him has shifted from despair to vigilance. He is no longer trying to survive the day. He is trying to protect the secret. Even the land seems aware of the ticking clock. Coyotes call less often. Winds change direction without warning. Grass moves without breeze. A subtle electricity rides the air, threading through his skin whenever he approaches the barn, like the atmosphere recognizes what's inside. The storm gathers strength. Lightning skirts the clouds. refusing to strike, tracing shapes that don't belong to weather. The wind turbines freeze mid-rotation, blades held perfectly still against the sky. The world holds its breath. Every external threat, bank, sheriff, neighbor, storm tightens like a noose. 3 days to fix something not meant for Earth. 9 days before the land is taken. One slip before someone calls the sheriff to check on him. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency creates clarity. He cannot fail. A low mechanical thump rolls across the land, a helicopter flying a path that no rancher has ever seen. Morning doesn't begin with sunlight. It begins with instruction. Prayer, the kind he practiced his whole life, was always shaped like pleading hands, clasped, eyes shut, voice begging into the void. But here, standing in the barn beside something that shouldn't exist, a new concept forms. Attention is direction. Gratitude is fuel. He has chased God for decades using desperation. But the presence in the barn shows another pattern alignment instead of begging. Not, please make something happen, but I choose to notice what already is. 2. The exercise begins with a minute. 60 seconds. Eli stands still enough to feel his pulse, still enough to hear dust settling on rafters. He focuses not on lack, but on what responds. The breath, the heartbeat, the space where fear ends and intent begins. This time, prayer isn't a plea, it's calibration. The mind wants to scramble, wants to anticipate, wants to reach for outcomes. But the barn's stillness draws him into discipline. Instead of panic, he practices precision, aiming attention the way a marksman aims a rifle, not by force, by focus. He notices something strange. When his focus sharpens, the air changes. Temperature shifts, pressure softens, silence deepens. Gratitude, held without words, becomes a current, invisible, but palpable. He opens his eyes. The rusted shop fan in the corner, the one that hasn't moved in years, quivers, not spinning, not powering on, just acknowledging his presence. For a split second, the fan blade jerks, a cough of motion, then stillness again. Not enough to be proof, just enough to make denial expensive. He exhales, not in triumph, but in shock. Prayer wasn't unanswered. It was misaligned. Begging kept him powerless. Aiming gave prayer a target. The minute ends. Something inside him has shifted. Not belief, curiosity. For the first time in years, the weight inside his chest feels lighter. Not because something external changed, but because something internal finally stopped fighting. The fan blade trembles again once, like the barn itself is deciding whether to obey. The next phase isn't mystical, it's mechanical. The barn transforms into a laboratory built from scraps and survival PVC tubes, copper wire scavenged from old breaker boxes, magnets salvaged from dead alternators. Each item holds history. Each becomes part of a new language. The coil begins as a simple circle, then a spiral, then a pattern that mirrors something deeper than geometry, something like intention. He winds the copper carefully, spacing each loop with the precision of a man who has spent a lifetime respecting voltage. The work demands full attention, not emotion, not hope, discipline. 2 deep cycle batteries sit side by side, terminals exposed. Their weight anchors the design. Their charge becomes the heartbeat of the system. He staggers their output not simultaneously, but in sequence. Pulse, rest, pulse, a rhythm, a forgotten cadence. It mirrors something from the drawer beside his bed. The prayer he gave up on. 3 beats, pause, breath. He didn't know prayer had frequency. He knows it now. The being watches, not impatient, not weakened, but connected. The panel beneath its ribs glows softly, the light synced to the rhythm of the coil. As he tightens the last bolt, Eli feels a sensation not in his ears, but around his body. Pressure, like the field is forming. Energy begins to gather, not loud, not obvious. Instead, the air feels denser, sweeter, heavy with potential. Copper vibrates, PVC warms, magnets snap into alignment. Then silence. Eli inhales. The coil answers, not with sound, with presence. A faint inward pull like gravity, but gentler centers itself in the space between him and the being. His breath deepens involuntarily. The room presses inward. Every molecule seems to lean toward the center point. The alignment worked. He built a field, not to make power, to hold it. A faint hum returns not through the air, but through the bones matching the rhythm of Eli's breathing. Patterns are invisible to the desperate. They reveal themselves only when someone becomes still enough to notice. And now that Eli has stopped begging and started observing, patterns begin to surface everywhere, quietly, persistently, like numbers whispering under their breath. It starts with the microwave clock, 7:07 a.m. He dismisses it as coincidence. Everything can be explained, but explanation and meaning are not the same. At the gas station, the total flashes on the screen. $7.07. Coffee, a sausage biscuit, and a bottle of water. Routine purchase. But the number sits there like it is staring back at him, daring him to recognize something he spent years ignoring. His hand reaches for a 5 and a 1, expecting to fumble for coins. Exact change waits in his palm. The number appears again when he turns on the old AM radio. Station ID. 107.7. The broadcast fades in with static, then clears just long enough for a preacher's voice to declare that nothing is random, that the universe communicates through patterns. Then the station dissolves back into static. He kills the radio. Silence returns. The urge rises, dismiss it, smother it, bury it beneath logic. For years, he begged for signs. Now that they appear without begging, he mistrusts them. But numbers don't ask for belief. They reveal alignment. Later, as he drives into town to buy copper fittings, a mile marker flashes past his window. Mile 107.7. He pulls off the road, gravel popping beneath tires. Wind pushes through dry grass. The world feels like a held breath. Patterns are no longer coincidence, they are instruction. The number becomes breadcrumb and compass, guiding him through decisions he didn't know he was making. When he reaches for something on the barn workbench, his hand gravitates toward the part marked 07 gauge copper wire. When he flips through the breaker panel schematics in his old electrician's binder, page 7 to 0, 7 holds the pattern needed to distribute current in pulses. Each time the number appears, something inside him softens. Someone or something is answering. Not with thunder, not with miracles, with precision. Patterns don't require belief, they require attention. Once he sees the number, he begins noticing everything else. The coil alignment stabilizes faster. The being's internal light synchronizes to the rhythm. The atmosphere responds differently, less chaotic, more intentional. For the first time, he feels partnered rather than abandoned. Numbers are the language of structure. Faith is the courage to follow them. He walks into the hardware store for the last supply he needs: connectors to hold the coil under tension. The shop smells like fertilizer and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead. A bored cashier rings up his items, thumbs tapping the keypad without interest. The register prints the total, $7.07. His hand opens. Exact change down to the penny rests in his palm. No counting, no searching, just readiness. Meaning doesn't scream, it aligns. He walks out of the hardware store, realizing that patterns aren't messages, they're invitations. Truth doesn't arrive as information, it arrives as recognition. On the second day, something shifts in the space between Eli's breath and the being's fading light. Not outwardly. The field holds steady, pulsing in time with the coil he built, and now the presence begins, showing him what prayer was always meant to be. Not desperation, not superstition. Alignment. Images unfold not as visions, but as witness. A hillside in ancient heat, light reflecting off dusty air. A man speaking calm, anchored, not promising escape from suffering, but revealing a new way to move through it. The kingdom isn't a place. It's a frequency. Something that resonates when attention and intention merge. Mustard seed faith wasn't about size. It was about focus. The smallest directed intention carries more effect than the loudest unfocused plea. Suddenly, the teachings he memorized as a child, parables about seeds, leaven, nets, shift from poetry into physics. Leaven rises only when mixed evenly into dough. Prayer works only when mixed evenly into life. Alignment, not performance. The images move forward through time, centuries collapsing like falling dominoes. A movement begins to swell. Not empire, not institution. A revolution in interior resonance. Humans experienced this frequency without understanding it. Then something interfered. The images twist stone buildings, golden halls, men in robes wielding power instead of presence. Faith becomes institution. Movement becomes empire. Prayer becomes transaction. The frequency that once set people free is now buried beneath spectacle. Even scripture changes shape. Words remain the same. Meaning shifts. The being doesn't accuse. It observes. Eli feels something inside him unravel, not belief, but misunderstanding. All those years he begged God to notice him, when alignment would have allowed him to notice God. Religion demanded worthiness. Presence only required awareness. The vision snaps into clarity. Truth wasn't lost. It was buried under interpretation. Then, in the quiet after the vision fades, a single line rises in his memory, written in red ink in his childhood Bible. A line he recited. A line he respected. A line he never understood. Until now, the line glows in his mind with new meaning. Proof that the teachings were never missing, only misread. The next layer comes not from scripture, but from history. American history. Brush arbors rise like skeletons of hope, raw lumber hammered together beside riverbanks. Lanterns shake in summer wind. Hymns erupt from throats cracked by drought. People fall into mud, not caring. They aren't chasing a doctrine, they're chasing presence. Camp meetings ignite thousands gathering beneath open sky, drawn by nothing but rumor. They don't need marketing, they don't need advertising. They feel something in their bones and follow. Sincerity fuels the fire. Then time moves. Radio towers appear broadcasting salvation across static and farmland. The frontier gospel becomes nationwide. The frequency spreads from riverbanks to living rooms. Voices of gravel and thunder reach the ears of people who never step foot in church. The message expands. The tone begins to shift. Television arrives. Suit jackets shimmer beneath hot studio lights. Cameras pan across crowds. Faith becomes production. Emotion becomes currency. Spirit becomes programming. The presence is still there but diluted. Marketing replaces mystery. Then the megachurch era dawns. Screens larger than barns. Sound systems that shake the soul. Sermons edited like films. Branding sharpened like a weapon. People still cry. People are still moved. But something subtle changes. The spotlight grows brighter than the presence it was meant to reveal. Sincerity and ambition braid together so tightly that no one can tell one from the other. The frequency remains, but the noise around it becomes deafening. The being does not judge the sincerity. It mourns the distortion. Once, faith required stillness. Now, faith competes with spectacle. Once, prayer was alignment. Now, prayer is performance. The presence shows Eli a final scene, one that cuts deeper than the rest. A stage light washes a preacher in pure white. The hue is identical to the impossible light that flooded the barn the night the sky held its breath. Connection. It wasn't fraud. It wasn't manipulation. It was interference. Humans felt something real, without knowing how to aim it. The stage light freezes mid-image, matching the glow in the barn, connecting two moments that were never supposed to touch. Revelation doesn't break a person. Relief does. The weight of understanding lands all at once. And the dam inside Eli finally ruptures. Years of silence. Years of unanswered pleas. Years of pretending he didn't care spill out all over the barn floor. He confesses the things he buried. The ring he nearly pawned, not for survival, for giving up. The prayer he stopped speaking, not because he lost faith, because faith stopped answering. The son he calls once a month, listening to it ring until voicemail picks up, then hanging up, too ashamed to speak into the silence. The being doesn't move. It doesn't fix him. It doesn't console. It simply holds space. Without performance, without conditions, the barn becomes an altar made of dust. When a person finally stops holding themselves together, something unexpected happens. There is room for truth where shame once lived. The collapse is not a failure. It is surrender. Emotion leaves the body like draining floodwater, slow at first, then unstoppable. The emptiness that follows is not loneliness. It is capacity. Capacity for new alignment. He stands in the wreckage of his own defenses and feels something he hasn't felt in years. Weightlessness. The barn's temperature rises, not from weather, not from machinery, but from presence. Revelation invites interference. The first sign arrives as gravel shifts at the county road tires, crunching slowly, not passing, pausing. A truck idles too long. The engine cuts. Someone watches. Silence becomes surveillance. A silhouette stands beyond the fence, unmoving head, angled toward the barn. Not close enough to identify, not distant enough to ignore. In small towns, privacy is a myth. The moment a man pulls away from the world pulls closer. Another pressure joins the first. A low mechanical drone stitches itself into the wind. Subtle. Rhythmic. Not crop duster. Not ranch plane. Too stable. Too controlled. The atmosphere tightens. Every external gaze becomes a threat not because of what lies in the barn, but because of what it might become. Miracles draw attention. Attention attracts control. Stillness becomes strategy. Eli kills the interior light, heart pounding against ribs, breath held as if sound could betray him. The barn goes completely dark, except for one faint pulse beneath the being's ribs. A beam of light, thin as a scalpel, slides along the barn seam. Searching. The beam hesitates, then moves on, leaving behind a warning. The world has begun to notice. The third morning arrives without sunrise. Light doesn't spill into the barn. It gathers hesitant, unsure, like the world outside is waiting to see what he chooses. The air holds a quiet tension, thick enough to taste. Nothing moves. Not dust. Not wind. Not doubt. Everything depends on this moment. The coil array stands completed on the workbench, copper wound in spirals. Magnets set at imperfect angles. 2 deep cycle batteries wired not in parallel, but in sequence. It shouldn't make sense, and yet the system hums with the same rhythm that once lived inside Eli's childhood prayers. The design resembles intention more than machinery. Today isn't about building, it's about alignment. The being leans against the far beam, its form thinner, almost translucent. Each tremor runs deeper than the last. Whatever sustains its body is nearly gone. The cracked panel below its ribs flickers with weakening light, as though held together by stubbornness alone. The device waits for breath. Eli inhales. Pulse 1. The coil responds with a subtle vibration, not electrical, but gravitational. The field condenses, drawing in the air around it. A faint ripple runs across the surface of the cracked panel on the being's ribcage. He exhales. Pulse 2. The field deepens, shifting pressure along the barn floor like a low tide pulling back. Tools rattle in their trays. A coil of spare copper rolls an inch, then stops, as though responding to something unseen. Breath becomes metronome. Intention becomes current. Gratitude, not desperate pleading, drives the sequence. Eli centers every breath not on outcome, but on appreciation. Not on wanting to fix, on valuing what already exists. The coil brightens. The tremor in the being's limbs slows. A third breath, longer, steadier, aligns everything. The panel beneath the being's ribs glows, not from energy being forced into it, but from energy being received. The crack holds steady. The leaking light stops spilling. Stabilization, not repair, not resurrection, initiates. The device isn't powering it. The device is agreeing with it. For the first time, Eli understands. Prayer was never about asking. It was about tuning. As the alignment sharpens, the barn's atmosphere transforms. Dust hangs, suspended mid-air. The world narrows into a single point of focus, the coil, Eli's breathing, and the presence watching him. A measurable field forms. Not theory, not metaphor. Evidence. The tremor stops completely. Silence expands. Not emptiness, fullness. The being straightens, not triumphant, but at peace. Its form stabilizes, edges sharpen. It doesn't glow brighter. It simply stops fading. Then, without warning, the barn clock loses power. The coil holds steady. The being holds steady. But the clock, digital, cheap, stubborn, jumps to a single moment. 7-7. The numbers freeze. No flicker. No reset. Just certainty. Time pauses long enough to be noticed. Eli stares, breath stalled halfway in his chest. The hands on the mechanic's wall clock stop. The LED numbers on the microwave in the corner freeze. Even the second hand hesitates, caught between ticks, suspended over possibility. The message is not subtle. The universe doesn't speak English. It speaks alignment. A calm settles into Eli's bones, not excitement, not victory, something quieter. Recognition. He didn't fix anything. He agreed with something already true. The field holds until the coil stops pulsing, until the last vibration fades into stillness. The being's panel is no longer cracked. The leaking light has evaporated. The barn falls silent again, but this silence feels different. Not emptiness. Completion. The clock remains frozen at 7:7. It doesn't return to normal. Not yet. Time does not restart, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what Eli will do next. The moment proof exists, the world reacts. Not spiritually, practically. Secrecy has its own instincts. At first, it's just a shadow crossing the gravel driveway, silent, fast, wrong. Then, a reflection catches on the barn window. A matte black SUV idling at the road. No headlights, no county markings. Small towns know every vehicle. This one does not belong. It lingers, engine silent, tires motionless as though waiting for a signal. A second SUV rolls in behind it, matching distance like synchronized swimmers. The engines remain off. The silhouettes inside remain still. Then Eli's phone dies. Not from battery loss, from interference. The signal drops to nothing. Emergency calls disabled. Not even GPS responds. Service doesn't fail here. It is removed. The pressure in the barn shifts. The being lifts its head, alert, listening to something beyond human hearing. A low-frequency rumble vibrates through the rafters. Eli steps back instinctively as a tremor ripples beneath the dirt floor. The air outside compresses. A helicopter descends without sound, military grade. Lights off, painted to disappear into the sky. It hovers just beyond the ridge, blades slicing the heat into unnatural waves. The downdraft bends the treetops like surrender. Something is hunting knowledge, something that cannot allow witnesses. The barn becomes a sanctuary and a trap in the same heartbeat. Eli's chest tightens, not from fear for himself, but from the realization that revelation draws pursuit. Proof attracts control. Not every miracle wants an audience. Not every truth wants a witness. Inside, the being moves, not toward escape, toward release. Its eyes, if they are eyes, shift toward the west wall of the barn. Not the door, not the open field, the wall. Something unspoken passes through the air. The alignment wasn't meant to keep the being alive. It was meant to give it enough strength to leave. The SUVs creep forward. The helicopter lowers. Wind funnels through the barn gaps, blowing papers across the floor. Tools rattle. The coil vibrates with residual power. Every external force converges at once. Authority, secrecy, fear. Still, the being looks only at the west wall, as though it is a threshold, not an obstacle. The being lifts a hand toward the wall, not in defense, but in intention, as if it sees a doorway where Eli sees only boards. Departure does not arrive with spectacle. No burst of light, no crash of thunder, no explosion of sound, only a shift in pressure. The being stands at the center of the barn, newly stabilized, posture calm. The air vibrates with a resonance too low for hearing, too deep for fear. Eli feels the sensation, not on skin, but in marrow. Presence without weight. Its form begins to thin, not fade thin. Edges soften, structure loosens. Like watching fog choose to remember it was once water. The wall does not open. It simply stops being solid. Boards do not move. Reality rearranges. The being passes through the barrier without resistance, without struggle. The barn wall remains untouched. The being becomes less matter, more motion. A density shifting from physical to something that defies category. Not vanishing, transitioning. Outside, the craft in the creek bed reacts. The hull folds inward, petal by petal, shrinking into a smaller form, no larger than a seed in a man's palm. The matte surface compresses into a dark, impossibly heavy sphere. The technology never intended to stay. It intended to return. The craft drops into the creek bed. Soil closes over it. Not to hide, to plant. The being turns once not a goodbye, not a farewell, something closer to acknowledgement. Then it is gone. The air lightens. The temperature normalizes. Sound returns, distant wind, restless insects, a faraway engine. The SUVs at the road rev their engines and leave without explanation. The helicopter banks sharply and disappears over the horizon. One by one, the intruders scatter, like predators denied a kill. The barn returns to ordinary. The lights flicker. The hum dies. The field collapses. Eli stands alone. In his hand rests an object small enough to lose but impossible to forget. A token. Heavy. Warm. The seed-like remnant of a craft not meant for Earth. He doesn't know what it is. He only knows what it proves. His silence was never rejection. His suffering was never invisible. Some mercies don't look like rescue. They look like release. A government vehicle rolls to a stop at the mailbox and doesn't leave. Miracles don't come with lightning. Sometimes they come with paperwork. The bank's automated system calls first voice, flat, digital, impatient. Eli braces for a foreclosure date. Instead, the message misfires. A glitch. His loan is flagged for temporary grace. 30 extra days. Next, the utility statement posts online. He expects red numbers. Instead, an adjustment shows an overpayment from years ago. Lost in system error, issued as credit, balance cleared. Then the phone rings again, not a glitch, not a collection. Work. Someone 3 towns over needs an electrical panel rewired. Cash. Today. No contracts. No questions. The kind of work a man only gets when someone mentions his name in a moment of goodwill. Providence doesn't always arrive wrapped in miracles. Sometimes it wears blue jeans. Eli drives out, rewires the panel, and writes the invoice. The paper curls slightly in the heat of the dashboard printer. The ink dries fast. The total prints at the bottom. $707. He doesn't speak. He doesn't celebrate. He just breathes. Small mercies accumulate like rainwater on barren land. Quiet. Unannounced. Enough to break a drought. The token remains in his pocket. Heavy. Warm. Undeniable. He no longer asks if God heard him. Now he asks a harder question. How much goodness was waiting? The entire time he thought he was alone? He folds the invoice, notices the total again, and feels the number echo not on paper, but inside him. Change doesn't roar. It whispers in habits. For Eli, starting over at 62 does not come as a revelation or a new identity. It comes in the unglamorous shape of morning. Before the sun hits the dusted windows of his kitchen, he puts on coffee, the old way, scoop, pour, wait. But the ritual is different now. His attention is not on what's missing in his life, it's on what responds. Prayer is no longer a plea tossed into silence. It becomes a schedule, a practice, a placement of awareness. He sets a timer for 60 seconds. He stands still. He names, quietly, 3 things that are already working without his intervention: breath, heartbeat, sunrise, and holds them in his mind until gratitude clicks into focus like a lens. The barn taught him that intention shapes reality. The practice teaches him that repetition shapes intention. He reads scripture again slowly, not as obligation, but as pattern recognition. Verses he skimmed for decades now behave like instructions. Wherever the text describes noticing, thanking, directing attention, he underlines. Pages that once felt like rules now behave like coordinates. He writes them down, not to memorize, to aim. The fear of failure doesn't vanish. It shrinks. Eli returns to First Baptist on a Sunday morning. No fanfare, no dramatic entrance, just a man walking through double doors without expectation. The sanctuary smells like decades of hymnals and lemon furniture polish. The worship band sounds competent, polished, familiar, but he no longer comes seeking rescue. He comes listening for resonance. In the space between songs, he practices the discipline the barn taught him. Attention first, gratitude second. Instead of waiting to feel something, he notices what already stirs beneath the noise, quiet warmth, where the ribs meet the sternum. Faith used to feel like trying to grab smoke. Today, it feels like settling into alignment. On Tuesday afternoon, he sits on his porch in the fading heat, token in his pocket, possibility in his chest. The phone rests on the arm of his chair. For years, He dialed the same number and hung up the moment voicemail answered. Not because he didn't care, because he didn't believe he deserved connection. Now he does not wait to feel brave. He practices. He dials. He breathes. He speaks into the space where fear once lived. No hanging up this time. On the other end of the line, silence holds long enough to change something inside both of them. Alignment does not stay local. When one life steadies its inner frequency, something subtle radiates outward, quiet as moon gravity, strong as tide. The narrator widens the frame. In Manchester, a widow sits in the back row of a stone church that smells of rain and old wood. She doesn't know why she came. Habit, maybe, but during the final hymn, she stops begging for peace and simply pays attention to the exhale leaving her lungs. A warmth rises, not dramatic, certain. In Nova Scotia, winter glass rattles in an old farmhouse kitchen. A man adjusts the furnace dial and pauses because the usual loneliness doesn't sting as sharply. Gratitude slips into his thoughts without invitation. Not for anything extraordinary, just breath, stillness. Enough. Far away, in a Texas barn, copper coils sleep. The experience that remade Eli starts slipping between borders, not through information, but through resonance. People in 3 countries describe the same thing at nearly the same hour. A low interior vibration, like a hum, not in the air but in the bones. They don't know about alignment, or copper, or 7-7. They only know something shifts when they stop begging and start noticing. Faith becomes less about effort and more about agreement. The narrator threads a needle through history tent revivals in the American South. Choir echoes in English cathedrals. Laughter over coffee in Canadian living rooms. The shape varies, but the motion stays the same. Whenever humans stop performing and start paying attention, presence rushes in. And then, the pattern sharpens. 3 separate posts appear online within a week, one from Texas, one from Manchester, one from Halifax. Different languages, same description. A hum, a vibration, an interior ease. None of them know they're talking about the same phenomenon. They will. 3 new reports mention the hum arriving at 7:07 p.m. down to the minute. Power always tempts possession. Once a human discovers that alignment influences reality not symbolically, but measurably, the ego wants to turn it into leverage, into spectacle, into profit. Eli learns the final principle the hard way. What he was shown cannot be weaponized. Any attempt to force results corrupts the frequency. Any attempt to chase power collapses the field. Alignment answers only one motive: love. Greed bends it. Fear distorts it. Performance empties it. Scripture he once skimmed now reveals the same architecture. The moment someone tries to display power, the power withdraws. The barn taught physics. The aftermath teaches restraint. People online begin speculating New Age forums, conspiracy boards, prophecy channels. They want instructions, techniques, secret steps to secure outcomes. Eli could teach them the mechanics. He refuses. Because the being did not reveal machinery, it revealed responsibility. Every misuse of alignment backfires quietly, efficiently. Manipulation collapses connection. Selfish intention shorts the circuit. Power protected by love is unstoppable. Power pursued for control dissolves. The message is not hidden. It is guarded. 2 worlds intersected only because a dying presence sensed devotion without agenda. Eli asked for nothing. He only wanted to know if God had noticed him. That's why he was trusted. Not because he was qualified. Because he wasn't hungry for power. On the barn bench, one final memory surfaces, red ink on thin paper. A sentence preserved by centuries, filtered through translations, misunderstood by millions. And now, clear as blueprint, the red-letter sentence overlays the copper coils in his mind like instructions written in both language and light. Some endings don't close. They pivot. Eli closes the barn for the night with steady hands. He doesn't rush. He doesn't cling. Tools return to their hooks. Copper coils rest. The token stays in his pocket, warm from the heat of his palm. Life no longer feels like something that happened to him. It feels like something he can participate in. He steps outside and locks the door. The night air meets him with a gentle chill. Crickets resume their rhythm. The ordinary world returns, porch boards under boots. Dirt road stretching toward the highway. Soft glow of the kitchen window waiting for him. He stands not as a man who survived silence, but as a man who knows how to listen. The practices remain small: attention, gratitude, alignment. but they form a doorway that never shuts. He realizes he can return to this presence anytime, not through coils, but through stillness. Purpose no longer feels like something distant. It feels like breath. He turns toward the house, the world quiet around him, future unwritten and open. A threshold is not a destination. It is the courage to take the next step.